Welcome back to the FPL video and podcast. This will be the best wildcard team for blank Gameweek 29. If you get these picks spot on, you are able to navigate this blank Gameweek coming up, double Gameweek 32 and 33, and future doubles and blanks like 34 and potentially 36 as well. So if you find some value in this video or enjoy it, then smash the like button, subscribe for new, and also hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single upload or live stream for both FPL and UCR Fantasy. There's a lot of content headed your way, especially this week, and even during the international break, there will be more videos and live streams headed your way, so don't worry about all of that, and be sure to check out all the links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships, for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. After several price falls in recent days to the likes of Cole Palmer and Matheus Cunha, my team value overall has gone down and it's currently 104.7 million when you count the money in the bank and also my team value currently. But there will be a lot of changes heading into blank Gameweek 29 with 2 free transfers. I've also got the free hit available, so I'll discuss my plans for blank Gameweek 29 in the upcoming team selection video. But in today's podcast, I'll be covering the best wildcard squad, covering every single position in detail, so you've got an ultimate 50-man squad, not just for this week, but also in the long term. I've been fairly consistent with my choice of goalkeepers in these wildcard and free hit videos. There is obviously one on the channel in the last couple of days ahead of blank Gameweek 29, and I think Matt Sells is the best goalkeeper from now until the end of the season, with excellent fixtures to round off the campaign, and Nottingham Forest are sitting third with 12 clean sheets, and Sells is leading that Golden Glove race, and he could make it 13 clean sheets by the end of blank Gameweek 29 facing Ipswich Town away. So I'm very bullish on the likes of Matt Sells, and I'd highly recommend at least one sort of Nottingham Forest defensive coverage. That could be with Aina, Milenkovic or Nico Williams, if not with Matt Sells in goal, and I honestly wouldn't mind a double up in the Forest defence. But the backup goalkeeper is Areola. You don't need to have 2 expensive goalkeepers like Pickford and Sells because you'll have benching dilemmas every single week, and sometimes you'll leave a very decent return on your bench, and I'd rather just stick with one goalkeeper and use the funds in the outfield positions because those are more important, and you'll gain a lot more points by making transfers in the defence, midfield and forward line. So with a goalkeeper pairing of Sells and Areola, that should be good for the rest of the season. It was quite surprising to see Gabriel play the full 90 minutes against PSV Eindhoven in a 2-2 draw, which saw Arsenal go through to the quarterfinals of the Champions League by an aggregate score of 9-3, and Gabriel for me has been Arsenal's best player for the entire season. He has stepped up in virtually every single game, and even when he makes mistakes, he can make up for it in the same match with a goal or an important moment or a match-winning tackle. So I think Gabriel is a great option from now until the end of the season. I know Arsenal's focus will be primarily on the Champions League, but it's going to be very tough for them in the quarterfinals against Real Madrid, and I still think they'll go strong in the Premier League to secure that top 4 spot. And Gabriel amongst premium defenders might be my favourite. We've got Gavardio at a similar price. I think going for both of them is viable, but it does mean a sacrifice somewhere else. And Trent Alexander-Arnold is currently yellow flagged. He blanks in Gameweek 29, and I'll cover the latest updates on his injury in my team selection video, as well as Saturday's deadline stream, so be sure not to miss it. But next up, I'm going for cheaper options in this position, and I'll be completely honest, I'm not fully sold on this particular pick, but Aid Nuri has a great blank Gameweek 29 fixture against Southampton away, and Wolves are top of the FDR, the fixture difficulty rating, until Gameweek 34. So for that price, I think it's worth a punt. And with Aid Nuri, he's fairly exciting to own at times with the goals and assist potential, and Wolves have been fairly decent defensively under Vitor Pereira, but sometimes they can be left wanting there, and Matheus Cunha was undoubtedly the best Wolves asset to go into blank Gameweek 29 with, but he's suspended for the next couple of matches, so unfortunately Aid Nuri is the best you can do from that particular team. You've also got Strand Larsen up front. You might want to take upon a Monetsi or Agbadu, but I think Aid Nuri at 4.7 million, now up to 4.8 million actually, I think he'd be even better than Agbadu and worth the extra millions in the process. But next up is Milos Kerkez. If you are struggling for funds, you could go for Dean Howson, who has more bonus points this season than the Hungarian left back, but with either pick, you've got a solid entry point into that Bournemouth defence. Kepa Arrizabalaga in goal isn't too shabby, and I wouldn't be going for Jose Sa if you are looking to cover Wolves defensively, but that's just my personal opinion. But Kerkez has the attacking threat. He produced a superb assist against Tottenham Hotspur in a 2-2 draw, and he has added more open play threat this season, particularly through the assists, and he can score the odd goal here and there. So I think Kerkez is a fairly decent shout, despite facing Brentford at home, which isn't the easiest of games for a defender. and a clean sheet might not be absolutely locked in there for Bournemouth, but I think Kerkez is still worth starting in a week like this. But I'm also going to go for Daniel Munoz, who blanks in 29, but then faces Southampton away in Gameweek 30, and he doubles in 32. So I think Munoz is still worth including, and his ownership is relatively low, and he will become a very template pick heading into double Gameweek 32. But you can go in early on him in Gameweek 30. You don't need to go for him just yet, and you might want to go for a defender punt elsewhere for blank Gameweek 29 and then move to Daniel Munoz. But it also depends on how many free transfers you've got available. That is extremely important. So I think with Munoz, it is circumstantial, but I'd still go for him, bench him in 29, and then start him in every single week until Gameweek 33 or 34, because Crystal Palace's fixtures do turn for the worse. But the final defender is Milenkovic, and that means another defensive double up, just like I discussed in my best free hit team video. But I think Nottingham Forest are one of the only teams worth doubling up on defensively. The other clubs worth considering could be Arsenal, with a very strong defensive line over the last couple of seasons. I think Liverpool might be worth a shout from Gameweek 30 onwards, but with the Premier League title essentially wrapped up, they could rotate in certain games, and even with the likes of Trent, who I'm very bullish on in the long term, he could be out for a couple of weeks if that injury turns out to be serious, the one he picked up against Paris Saint-Germain in that 1-0 defeat at home. But I do like this defensive line. You've got a combination of bonus points, goals, assists for it, and clean sheets, especially from the likes of Gabriel and Milenkovic. Many FPL managers will be in the market for a budget midfielder, and I think the likes of Alanga, Gibbs White and Hudson-Odoi will be great options, but I've opted for a defensive double-up for Nottingham Forest. And then when you look at the other options at 6 million and below, especially when looking at Alanga and Hudson-Odoi, I think Nwaneri would be an alternative pick here. You're covering the Arsenal attack with probably the best option in terms of value. He's 4.7 million, and essentially he can be your 8th attacker. You can bench him very easily, more often than not, and when needed, perhaps in blank Gameweek 29, you can start Nwaneri and have a decent chance of getting some returns. He also got a full rest against PSV Eindhoven in the Champions League round of 16. Next up is Mohamed Salah. Very boring, I know, but I just don't like the idea of going without him, even for just one game week. For 29, it's absolutely fine, by the way. You can do Salah to Bruno Fernandes if you've got the funds, and then go back to Salah in Gameweek 30. The only downside to that is you lose a lot of value tied up in Salah, especially for those who owned him since Gameweek 1. But that is something worth considering. If you want to take a 1 week punt and sell Salah, I'd be looking at Foden, Bruno Fernandes, and these sorts of options here. But I think for most people with 1 or 2 free transfers and it'd be a struggle to get him back in, I just keep him in your wildcard team and keep things very simple there. But next up is Brian Mbeumo. Brentford have poor fixtures on paper for the next couple of weeks, but Mbeumo is fairly fixture proof and he's been so consistent all season. So in a week where you're kind of struggling for reliable midfielders, I think Mbeumo could be one of them. But I certainly wouldn't mind if you were to go for a Phil Foden and take a real punt there for the next 3 to 4 game weeks, not just for blank Gameweek 29. That could work very well. I would say Bruno Fernandes, but Man United have pretty similar fixtures, in fact, to Brentford. The only upside there is that for blank Gameweek 29, Man United face Leicester away, whilst Brentford face Bournemouth away. So there's a real contrast there in terms of the fixture, but long term, they both are near the bottom of the fixture difficulty rating. I would also go for Justin Kluivert. I think he's the best Bournemouth asset, and his consistency has been very impressive. Only 2 blanks since Gameweek 21. He's on penalties, decent underlying stats, and I think the minutes are more secure than they were early in the season. He's levels above Dango Ouattara, who will now be a bench player once again, with Evanescence returning. Semenyo as well can be very hot and cold, so I think Kluivert is the one to go for. He is fairly template, admittedly, just like Brian Mbeumo, but they are template for a reason, and you can find differentials elsewhere, and that's what I'm going to do with the 5th midfielder pick in Jared Bowen, who has a fairly decent blank Gameweek 29 fixture against Everton away, but I think West Ham assets might be very appealing for double Gameweek 33, and Bowen could be a template pick by that point of the season, but you can go early on him in 29, and I have discussed him in a lot of detail in recent wildcard and Transfits podcasts as well. But like I mentioned before, if you want to diversify your midfield even further, you can go for a Foden and or Bruno Fernandes to replace the likes of Salah, at least for 1 week, but I wouldn't recommend doing that in the long term. And as for Mbeumo and maybe Kluivert, you can go against them, but if I had to pick one to keep in my FPL team, it would be the Dutchman Kluivert with a cheaper price point and better fixtures for Bournemouth. There's definitely a debate that going for Erling Haaland limits the rest of your squad, and you might argue that's one of the problems with this team in the wildcard. I completely get that. And all season, at least since Game Week 10, I've been very bullish on going for the likes of Parma and Isak instead of Haaland and a cheap midfielder, which in this case would be Wanyeri. But for blank Game Week 29, we could see a shift in the template, with Cole Palmer failing to score in 9 consecutive games across all competitions, whilst Erling Haaland has been scoring in most matches recently, despite the fact he still doesn't justify that 14.7 million price tag. I think he's a great option for the captaincy in Game Weeks 29 and 30, facing Brighton and Leicester at home in the process. Now, the Seagulls have been in great form, so I don't think you should go all out on Man City, who have still been struggling with 15 losses out of the last 30 matches across all competitions as well. But the likes of Haaland have still been churning out returns very consistently, and I think he's definitely worth a punt for Game Week 29. But for that price point, do you want a punt? Not necessarily. You want a long-term pick, a set and forget option who can rival Salah for the captaincy, and I think Haaland can do that, especially in Game Week 30. But next up, I'm going to go for a different sort of option here, and he has got very low ownership. It forms an offensive double up, but I think Ivanosen is definitely a very intriguing option for the next couple of weeks. And in my case, I've got Semenyo and Cliver already, which slightly puts me off Ivanosen. That would mean a triple up in Bournemouth offensively, which is probably a little bit too much, even in a week like this. But for those of you with only Cliver or no Bournemouth attackers, I think Ivanosen is definitely worth including. He scored against Wolves in the FA Cup upon his return from injury, and he backed that up with a goal in the Premier League in that 2-2 draw against Tottenham Hotspur. So I think he's a very good differential on paper. And when you compare him to Visser, for example, who has a good record against Bournemouth with 3 goals and 1 assist in the last 2 matches and back-to-back double-digit hauls, he's got poor fixtures for the next 5 game weeks, whilst Ivanosen has good fixtures overall, and Bournemouth would be favourites in blank Game Week 29 facing Brentford. Strand Larsen has good fixtures, but he's been very inconsistent, especially since he returned from injury. Marmoush would be one to consider, but I certainly wouldn't double up in the Man City attack with the forward slots. I think Foden in the midfield is fine alongside Haaland or Marmoush, but when you've got 3 forward slots, to have 2 of them occupied by the same team, I'm not too keen on that, especially with Man City. But if you can't afford Erling Haaland, Marmoush is a nice alternative. Nowhere near the levels of consistency just yet for the club, but he does have the explosive nature which he showed against Newcastle with that first half hat-trick. Hopefully shows more consistency and gets the starts. I think we'll get the nod in Game Weeks 29 and 30 to be in that starting lineup and perhaps score some goals and get some assists in the process. But the final forward is a template pick in Chris Wood. I think he's a no-brainer and a great replacement for the likes of Mateus Cunha, who's suspended, Jean-Philippe Mateta, who blanks in Game Week 29 and is also injured, but he could return for Game Week 30 or 31 just in time for double Game Week 32, and that would be more than welcome for FPL teams because we're struggling in the forward market right now with all these injuries and suspensions. But I do like this forward line. You've got a differential in Ivanosen, and going for Erling Haaland now means you're quite early, I think, and ahead of the template from that shift from Parma to Erling Haaland in our setups, and Chris Wood offers you the consistency and the bonus points. As you probably know by now, one of the best websites for visualizing future game weeks, comparing different transfer plans and seeing potential lineups is FPL.team. And what I mean by potential lineups is by making certain transfers, you can be like, how would my team look like in Game Week 29? Well, this is exactly what the website can provide you. It also offers some suggestions on captaincy, expected points and stuff like that, but this is my favourite feature. And Sells is in goal facing Ipswich Town away, forming a defensive double-up with Milenkovic, Kirkes, Aït-Nouri and Gabriel. You can start Wanyeri over one of these defenders. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. And for those looking to go for Elanga, Gibbs-White or Hudson-Odoi, I would definitely recommend starting them in Game Week 29 if you've got them in your setup. Bowen, Mbeumo and Cliver gives you a very solid midfield base with Haaland, Chris Wood and Ivanosen up front. The bench has Areola and Wanyeri who feature, while Salah and Munoz blank. If you have multiple free transfers, you could take a 1-week punt for blank Game Week 29 and sell Mohamed Salah to a Phil Foden or Bruno Fernandes, so that's completely up to you and it depends on your team's circumstances. And if you were to do such a thing, you can start this player over Milos Kirkes, which prevents a clash in your starting 11 between Mbeumo and Kirkes, and you've got more of a balanced team with some very good options. In fact, you're covering most of the best ones, which can rival free hitters for Game Week 29, and you've got the long-term platform for future doubles and blanks as well, as long as you buy Salah back for Bruno Fernandes in Game Week 30. I think he'd take the vice captaincy, but Haaland would still be my standout captaincy pick. And I'll talk about the top 10 captains in my deadline stream. There will be graphics provided for that, alongside clean sheet odds and much more. So stay tuned for the latest FPL and Use Your Fantasy videos, and I hope to see you on board on Saturday. That wraps up the best wildcard team for blank Gameweek 29. It can be slightly awkward to use the wildcard chip this week, but it can still work fairly well, assuming you've got multiple free transfers to navigate this blank Gameweek with 1 week punts, and then you can switch them back to those long-term solutions like Isak, Salah, and Daniel Munoz. I think those three would definitely be viable from Gameweek 30 onwards, but things change so quickly in FPL, and sometimes players who are maybe in essential form or that show real consistency can suddenly fall off a cliff, and you might see some shifts in the template and you want to go a little bit different with certain picks, and that's what I've done for every single position. And I highlighted other players you can go for that weren't actually shown on screen, but the discussion continues in the comments section across all my social media platforms. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like the video, subscribe to the channel, and also hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single upload or live stream for both FPL and Use Your Fantasy. Follow me on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League, and Spotify can also be found in the description. I wish you all the best of luck for blank Gameweek 29 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you on Saturday for another deadline stream.